Hi, this is Steve Hargadon, and I'm with Audrey Waters again this week. Today is the 13th of January, 2012, and we're looking at the week in EdTech news. Audrey, this is such a delightful hour for me every
I
week.
know, I always look forward to it. Last night as I was sort of going through all of the news that happened this week, it's always like, oh, I can't wait to get to talk to Steve about this one.
Hey,
So
we actually have some followers. Have you noticed?
I know, we have, it's great.
And we received our first invitation to speak together at a conference.
Yes, that's very exciting. Yes.
We'll be at the Sloan Merlot conference in July, late July, in Las Vegas. That was very fun. I will tell you, I kept laughing this week. The I Made a Math app kept me going all week long.
Oh, that's great. Good.
It was a lot of fun, and I've shown it to several people. Hey, we've also started at Incubator,
We have, which
and
is very exciting, I think.
it's very exciting. This is a chance for small startups and educational companies to get an authentic audience with educators, and we are hoping it's a real contribution on our side to helping those organizations and companies. Our first project is with PBS NewsHour. And if you go to edincubator.com, you can find the information there, and it clicks you to a link for a group on Classroom 2.0, where you can join to help NewsHour with their student journalism efforts.
Yeah, this is one of the things I think that, I mean, for me personally, helping bridge this gap between educators and education companies, entrepreneurs, that I think that sometimes we operate in these different circles, and I love this idea of us, providing the space for people to actually to actually talk, so that we're building, we're actually building solutions to people's problems.
Yeah, I think we're both very excited about it, and we have some other fun projects I think that are coming up soon, and we'll keep you all informed. Okay, so you did a long video interview this past week,
I
or at
did.
least it was posted.
I did.
Yes.
Yes.
Do we need to be moving to video? Are we in the old school here?
I have to think that video is going to be a pretty big thing, and it's funny because I mean, you and I've only been doing this podcast for a short time now, so we're sort of late on the podcast train. But I do think video is becoming increasingly important. I think that, and whether people are sort of watching it or just listening to it as they would perhaps a podcast, I think it is going to be a very, very important trend for teaching and learning too, not just for our for our platform.
I have a mixed relationship with video. I do really enjoy it. I find that I listen to things more often than I watch the video.
Me too.
I sometimes will even convert video to audio. And part of my biggest problem is where do I store it and how do I easily access it?
Well, and I think, thinking back to last week, our conversation about the predictions for this year, I think that our increase, all of us, our increased usage of video is creating bandwidth issues. And I'm not sure that schools and libraries in particular are equipped yet to both be the creators, the uploaders, the storing, downloading, watching, streaming. I think we're going to be running into some bandwidth problems, but I do think the video is exciting.
Was there anything that came up in that interview that you and I didn't discuss or that was new to you as you went through that process?
I don't think so. No, I don't think so. I think
It was an hour. I
it
chose
was
not
an
to watch
hour.
it.
No, I know. I was exhausted too. I was like, and I think I even wore out Seth, who's usually a very high energy host, and he was like, "Oh my God, I'm exhausted." So
An hour is just too long. You and I are really good about keeping to 55 minutes.
exactly, exactly.
Okay, I want to talk about OLPC. And but before I do so, I'm kind of intrigued by the degree to which it feels as though the world of the internet or Web 2.0 has changed how things happen. Meaning a lot of the companies in the Web 2.0 world have served as sort of canaries in the coal mine of having to be really responsive to user demands
Hmm.
and doing maybe a lot less leading and a little bit more following to understand trends. And my core question about OLPC is, have they done a good job following, or in their desire to lead, have they ended up kind of being out in the wilderness alone?
I think that that's. I mean, I think that that's actually very important question. And I say this partially because, I think the vision, Nicholas Negroponte's vision here is a wonderful one and an important one, putting a computing device into the hands of children everywhere. But sort of as the time it's taken for OLPC to build this right device, and they've done so very carefully, right, in terms of the components and the cost and the durability and the low power consumption. So as they've slowly designed and manufactured these devices, the mobile revolution is sort of already happening in the parts of the developing world with the cell phone. And so it's interesting to, in some ways it feels as though the caution and the deliberation, I should say, that the speed at which the project has moved has actually been sort of leapfrogged now by the cell phone. And I mean, I think that the argument would be, well, you do different things with a cell phone than you can do with these laptops and now tablets. But I'm not so sure if that's necessarily such a gap.
Well, I think it was particularly evident in this OLPC XO 3.0 because it's as though they're coming to the back to the tablet or to the what has been the commercial solution. And you give a staggering figure of 80% of the world has cell phones.
Yes.
And all of a sudden we have now the OLPC, becoming one of the flavors being an Android tablet, the other, I guess, being Linux. And yeah. I don't know if is that the same software they were running on the previous machines, or is it a new version?
I think it's a new. It's SugarSync, and I'm not sure if that's the same version or not. I think it is new software for the tablet because of the touchscreen.
Yeah, there was a little bit of sadness for me in this story, which is, building an Android tablet. You see there seems to be so much momentum now for those tablet devices, and it would be so hard to compete with what are going to be lowering prices, and the difficulty of selling a substandard tablet with lower functionality or worse performance at a lower price, as we've seen,
right.
Out of India. So, if the commercial market can produce a device that 80% of some population uses, are we more likely to see the tablet get adopted from traditional commercial market techniques rather than something as noble as OLPC?
Right, and I think too, I think that the other piece of this, I think, has changed is the fact that this is still going to be a government, this is a government implementation, technology implementation. So OLPC still says that they're not planning on any sort of mainstream public consumer market release for these devices. These are still going to be sold to governments who will then distribute them in turn. And again, it feels as though that's a very different way to distribute these technology than just the explosion of the consumer device, which has become ubiquitous. I mean, even in the poorest parts of the world, it's sort of people aren't waiting to get their government issued mobile computing device. They've done it. They've prioritized it themselves.
And we've talked about this so many times before, just this model of, do you build a software program or a service that answers very human needs that gets brought into education, or do you build something for education? And again, I keep feeling as though it's the thing that answers the human need that gets brought into education. And for me, the huge contrast here was the discussion about how the power of this device is a reading device. And I thought, why not just send a Kindle? Right.
Yeah, I mean,
a $79 Kindle, which probably costs.
Yeah, and I think would likely. I mean, this is one of the problems that that those $35 Akash tablets have out of India, is that the battery life just doesn't last. And even if you have a hand crank or a solar device, for those of you who own the Kindle, that the battery really lasts a long time with those, and I think that that is a good reading device.
I want to be really careful not to knock noble aspirations and a lot of hard work.
Yes,
but it is an intriguing story.
Well, and I think, I mean, I'm going to be very interested to, I mean, to see sort of what comes of it, because the OLPC has had its share of hiccups before. It's struggled to get some of these devices out the door. There have been delays. There have been, the cost hasn't always been quite right. And so, you know, is this the device that a lot of people have been hopeful for? I'm not sure.
Fascinating. Can't wait to hear more. Search Plus.
Yes.
Is this really the biggest change in a decade?
This
I
is
I had a little trouble with that.
this is a pretty big. This is a. I think this is a really big deal for Google. What Google announced this week was that it was going to start including what it's called Search Plus Your World. And so, in addition to sort of the 10 blue links that Google has always given you for a search return, they're going to now start offering you, quote, personalized results. And those are based on your Google Plus network. And so Google says, of course, that this is that this is going to be making sure that you're getting socially relevant answers to your search queries. And there have been all sorts of controversies this week whether or not this is some sort of should the FTC look into this, and is this going to sort of ruin the way in which we've trusted Google for a long time to give us the best results, quote, best results, and not ones that are sort of predisposed to link back to Google's own platform. I think this is a very big change to the sort of algorithmic approach to search that Google was founded on. And I think it had some strange implications, particularly for schools where currently students don't, anyone under 18 doesn't have a Google Plus account.
I I, I have mixed feelings. I don't want Google to rank and prioritize based on what they know about me without my controlling it.
Mm-hmm.
But by the same token, I go to my friends for advice. So of
Right.
course, searching within my own networks makes a lot of sense. So I come to the conclusion, I think much like you do, which is social search isn't going to go away. So we have to teach people how to use it well.
Right.
And and Google and Microsoft and anybody else doing search has to make sure that they're doing their part well.
I think that the search literacy, and I think you have talked about this before, search literacy is really important. And I think that Google's just added, I think Google actually should maybe think about doing a little bit better job. I know they've tried, they have a puzzle a day that they are trying to teach people how to use search better. But I think that adding this social component now adds another layer of complexity. And again, because students won't be able to utilize that in the classroom in most school settings, I think it's going to be a strange it's a sort of a missed opportunity to teach, if for nothing else, teach a student the importance of cultivating your social networks so that you have, quote, good advice from people. And it's not sort of just which movie should I go see on a Friday night, but if you have people in your social circles that are, I don't know, quantum physicists, and you do a Google search, it would make sense that you'd like to be, you'd like to have the things that those people have read and shared. There should be some way of indicating, that the quantum physicists in your social circles like a certain item.
So when I do a search now at Google on
Mm-hmm.
my Chrome browser on my laptop, I get a little bar at the top that says X number of personal results,
Yes.
and then some number, it's grade, of other results. So I'm assuming that my personal results are very personal, and when I click on the other results, they're completely objective. But
Whatever that
they don't
means.
seem objective. I actually have wondered, now, do I still need to go down to the more search tools here to actually get fully objective? And have they if you search Hargadon under Google,
Mm-hmm.
are your first, 6 listings Steve Hargadon with photos from Steve Hargadon? I can't imagine they are.
Well, when I search it right now and I click on the personal search results, yes, I get your photos. I
No,
actually
but
get,
click on the non-personal.
oh, on the all results. Okay. No, there's the first three. The first three are you, and there's actually a little picture, a little image that suggests, I guess, that that we're connected in the social circle. But then I get, well, no, actually, these are all you. I get Andrew
Well, I don't.
Hargadon
Okay,
eventually.
but I don't think you're getting the same results as me.
No,
And
I
and
don't
my
think.
argument would be Google needs to do this better. If you tell me you're going to do personal results and then other results,
Hmm.
then those other results really have to be other results. But
Yeah.
if I've read this correctly, and I hope I have, not that I hope that I'm correct, but I hope that I'm stating it correctly. Those other results aren't fully objective.
Yeah, and I think, well, I mean, and I think again, this sort of goes back to thinking through what is, how does Google work anyway, right? Google's algorithm is privileging links, and I mean, lots of other information it goes into the Google algorithm, but it's definitely weighted upon sort of inbound links, outgoing links, how much sort of how many signals does a particular site or web page give off that make it think that it's the right information. So there's still this question of sort of how does Google choose the best, most relevant answer already? Because it's not necessarily the best answer. It's just the one that its algorithm has surfaced as the most relevant. And I'm not sure that the social search yet is quite right. Although I think it could be interesting. I mean, for me, in on Google Plus, I haven't circled that many people. I've been very careful about who I've circled, and it's been primarily educators or people involved in education technology and journalists. And so, in some ways, I like the personal results that it's giving me because I tend to do searches about education technology, and it tends to surface the things that my people in my social circle, my Google circles have shared. But I think it's still this question of like, is that the most relevant? Is that still relevant? I don't know.
Well, so I did the search under Hargadon. I got the personal results and then the other results.
Mm-hmm.
I clicked on the other results and they didn't feel like they were fully objective. So I went down to the more tools. I think it's more tools. And then I had to click way down on something called verbatim
Yes.
to actually get the objective search. So my contention would be, yes, we have to be teaching search literacy,
Right.
and we don't want to avoid social search. But I don't think Google's been fair here. I don't think that what they're calling all results is actually objective, and that's going to make it even harder to teach.
Right. I mean, and after all, even you know, Google is always limiting your searches to your language and your location, and so you're going to have it's going to return English only, or typically, unless you make a search in a foreign language, it's going to return English only results, and it's going to prioritize information that's nearby you. And so I think that the all results, I mean, and you can still turn that personalization off as well. But yeah, I mean, the information that Google presents isn't somehow objective or unbiased ever.
So I'm a Google fanboy.
Me too.
Let's make it clear.
I know, me
Anybody
too.
from Google who's listening, please don't mistake my appreciation. Same with Nicholas Negroponte. Again, great appreciation for the tremendous work being done, but this feels to me like still a little bit of effort could be made here.
Yeah, and I'm
However,
not sure. I'm not sure that. I mean, I know a lot of people are sort of, standing outside with the pitchforks, calling in the FTC to look at Google, and I'm not sure that. I mean, I think that there are some power plays going on right now in the tech world with Facebook and Google and Twitter in particular, that I think is all sort of these sort of machinations. But I think the important question is sort of what does the future of search look like, and who do we trust, and if we can't trust Google, because I mean I've long trusted Google as a search engine. Sort of what then, right? I mean,
right. Yeah, the important issues worth bringing up. And it leads really well to your next story, which was, should all college majors, not just computer science, learn to code?
Yeah.
And I don't think you really mean necessarily coding in the same way that I don't need to learn to take apart a carburetor.
Right.
But what I think you're communicating is this is becoming such an important part of our lives. We need to have some fluency or literacy around the core driving um, principles or objects that make such a difference in our lives.
Yeah, I think so. This was actually a very funny. This was sort of a funny story for other reasons that actually got back to Google as well. Because in some ways, I felt as though this was sort of a no-brainer. Like, yes, we definitely need to make sure that we're definitely raising the literacy, the technical literacy of all students. And I think I sort of framed it as, should some sort of CS class be a graduation requirement? And I didn't expect that much pushback. And I didn't get, there were most of the tweets I saw were positive, but when I shared the link on Google Plus, there's actually a bunch of really horrified, mostly IT professionals who insisted it was the most ridiculous idea they'd ever heard of, and that we should not be teaching programming, and we should not be diluting the field by teaching everyone, giving everyone more technology skills, and it was a bad idea, and we should save
Interesting.
medicine for the doctors and programming for the professionals. And I thought, wow, I was
That's
shocked.
very interesting. Well, it I don't want to dive too deeply here, but it does go directly to the sort of question of what is education for.
Mm-hmm.
And we like to think of education in very noble terms, that it liberates us, that it gives us intellectual capacity to question and to think about things at a very deep thought level. But the truth of most education is that it really doesn't do those things, that it helps us to conform to sort of traditional ways that things are done in our society. And I think the reaction you got is that pushback.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting thinking because, the sense, a lot of it was too, like, how dare you sort of demand that college students take certain classes. And I thought, well, we demand we demand that all the time. I mean, we make all sorts of requirements or most universities do have, requirements that you take certain classes in order to graduate. So it was very funny to see the response on Twitter, where I should say most of my followers are probably teachers or technologists, versus my followers on Google Plus who think differently, I think.
Interesting. Well, I wasn't sure it needed to be a requirement, but I will say that for me, my understanding of search, to the degree that I do, I feel that I have some skills there, and my understanding of HTML in very practical ways really benefit me. So that was sort of the message for me, which is these are actually very tangible skills, and they really make a difference right now. So whether or not you want to make an argument that everybody should take it, certainly I think you can make the personal argument that your own children really would benefit from having these skills.
Yeah, I mean, and another one of the pushbacks that I got on Google Plus was that there are so many sort of easy tools now that make it possible for people to accomplish what they want to without knowing any HTML, for example. So you can use a blogging tool like Blogger or WordPress, and you'll never have to sort of look at the source code and worry at all about HTML. And I would push back on that and say that, knowing HTML seems like, I think that's it's a required skill. I think it is.
Okay, so this Google Science Fair Online sounds like about just the coolest thing I've ever heard of.
I
I mean,
know.
is it as great as you've portrayed it?
I think that I love the fact that Google, see here we go. Listen to that, Google. I love the fact that Google is doing this. And this, I think it's important to remember that Google is very much a company based on this notion of scientific experimentation. I mean, there's not this notion that you could build a search engine that could somehow make index make the world's information indexable and searchable. That was a scientific, that was the hypothesis that the Google founders had, and it's great to see them continuing to promote scientific inquiry in kids. Plus, they're offering really, really phenomenal prizes. So
Well, so read the post. A lot of fun. Just sounds like a brilliant program.
Yeah, I think it's
Okay, so I
one thing to add to it that I think is important is I think it's interesting to take a science fair and put it online. I think that that there's something about I'm really interested in things that we can do to sort of lower the barrier to entry for people participating in STEM activities, particularly young girls. And I have to wonder if there's something about doing a science fair online where you're not anonymous, but you're a lot more anonymous than you would be standing in your school cafeteria or school gymnasium. So I love the idea of taking it online too. Sorry, that's it.
no, I loved it, and it actually kind of connects with this treehouse coding competition
Hmm.
you talked about. I mean, it's almost like the reality TV cooking competitions. There's something about the fact that these are relatively normal people that you see competing.
Yes.
And my sense is that it gives the rest of us confidence. Hey, we actually could do that. We see how progress is made. It feels a little bit more transparent and a little less like just the elite few
Right.
who are really talented. And I love that. I love that. And again, this is my reality TV soapbox. I don't love reality TV, but I love reality TV competitions
Hmm.
like the cooking ones because they say to me, we're beginning to make it transparent how people actually develop talent and the time and energy and work. And that's a really good thing from my
Yeah.
perspective.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that was a soapbox, wasn't it? Okay, so I know there's a different ending to the story than when I started making notes, but you didn't think you were going to get an invitation to the Apple event. And so, of course, you posted a snarky post, right, which would increase your um, likelihood of getting invitation. But now that I'm thinking, okay, this didn't actually get posted yet,
No. Well,
right?
that's right. The so as I think we indicated last week, Google. See, I'm stuck on Google now. Has an event, a press event on Thursday in New York, and I happen to be in New York next week, and I tried to get a press pass, and I'm stuck on Google. Apple is Google responds to my emails. Apple does not, and so I thought, well, they're never going to let me in. And I through Inside Higher Ed got the correct email address of where to request a press pass, and they still didn't answer. And so me, in my typical calm manner, thought, well, I'll just write something terribly snarky and awful about Apple's plans for textbooks. But now it looks as though I get to be there. So.
Your snarky posts are my favorite. So I'm skipping around a little bit. Sometimes they're snarky, and you can kind of see a smile written into them, and sometimes they're just pure deadpan irony. So the award for this week's deadpan irony was the Blackboard announcement. I can't even do this because I'm employed by Blackboard, so I really, I can't go there. But do you want to read the quote that you put in that post? Do you have it handy?
I don't have it handy.
Oh darn, you're going to make me read
Oh
it.
no, am I?
Okay, so this learning analytics solution will provide a complete view of teaching and learning, monitoring usage patterns and data in the learning environment system (LMS), along with information from the student information system. The real-time and longitudinal data generated by the system could be used to help better engage students, measure and improve learning outcomes, and assess the adoption and use of online learning tools. So we're not saying anything about the quality of the product. And as a Blackboard employee, of
Uh,
course, I don't know the product. I'm not going to criticize it, but I'm guessing that that's language that you don't like.
well, I this is one of the things that I think we're going to see a lot of. I mean, I think we've indicated this before. I think the data and analytics are going to be a big. We'll see a big push for that this year, and I think in some ways it's really going to be full of marketing spin, right? The fact that this is sort of in some ways feels like very much this feels like very empty rhetoric. And of course, for a long time now, you have if you've used Blackboard, you can sort of see the last time a student logged in, and you could sort of piece together piece together sort of analytics that way. But is that a complete view of teaching and learning? No, not so much. And I'm not sure what Blackboard would have to do to provide a complete view of teaching and learning. But I'll go out on a limb and say it's probably not going to happen with any LMS, Blackboard or otherwise.
Moving right along.
Moving right along.
So, okay, what I love about technology is sometimes something will happen that completely takes you by surprise and reorganizes how you think what might happen is going to happen. And I certainly have felt that way about Android phones and tablets. And you had pretty much proclaimed the Chromebook dead.
Yes.
And yet Samsung announces some new products in this area, one of which, the Chromebox,
Yes.
kind of blew me away.
Actually, I was very surprised, and perhaps this will be the first 2012 prediction that I'll have to eat my words on, although I'm sure there'll be more. But yeah, I thought that I really hadn't seen either Google or Samsung, who's the maker of one of the makers of the Chromebook so far. I hadn't seen much from them. I hadn't heard much in terms of sales. But at the Consumer Electronics Show this week, Samsung was clearly well positioned to be a strong hardware player in the coming years. And that looks like they're moving forward with several new Chromebooks. That Ultrabooks were sort of a hot word out of CES this year, sort of a thinner, lighter laptop, and the Chromebooks look like they're going that direction, including a desktop-ish version, which I thought was very, very interesting.
Well, there were manufacturers who took the netbook and actually turned it into a little standalone device. Mm-hmm. But there was something about the standalone device that's just running Chrome that somehow made sense to me. I'm very curious about it. The first place I thought of it was the kitchen.
Yeah, well, one of the problems I think that Chromebooks face is the fact that they do require you to be online all the time. And even though I think Google's tried very hard to make some of its apps work offline, and thanks to HTML5 they can do that. But really, the Chromebook doesn't work at all. Like if you're on an airplane, for example, and you don't have Wi-Fi on the plane, you can't work on your Chromebook. And so I think that in some ways it makes more sense, I should say, to have it as a desktop rather than a mobile device.
I love the two-screen feature of the Chromebox that was mentioned in the story as well.
Yes.
Okay, WizIQ. So yes. Again, with the desire to be clear about conflict of interest, so I do work part-time for Blackboard. That work is around Blackboard Collaborate, which is a competitor to WizIQ. Mm-hmm. So WizIQ has a new version out. So tell me about it.
So they're rolling out a number of improvements to it. At making the video calls support more people, better screen sharing. They're trying to simplify the way in which breakout rooms operate for webinars. WizIQ is, I think WizIQ is an interesting company that I don't know if it doesn't seem to get a lot of attention, and I'm not sure why that is. But I know Chris Dawson that works for them, and he's a good guy.
Have you used the product?
I've not used the product.
I'll be interested. I'm going to try it. I'd love to see how it works. Okay, language learning. I don't really know this market, but it made me wonder. I did an interview a couple of years ago with, I think it was University of Texas language learning program. And they did this brilliant thing where they have the upper class students actually create and record the lessons for the first year students, mm-hmm. which of course creates a, when you teach, you learn moment for the upper class students. It creates a great entree for the first year students who are seeing their friends actually walk into a cafe in Paris and speak French, right, and giving a lesson. And it's acknowledged that the French isn't always perfect, but that the social piece has such a power to influence the desire to learn the language and the confidence mm-hmm. that it makes a huge difference. Has anybody tapped into this in the language program world? Is that part of the story here? I think
that the stuff that Live Mocha is a different approach to language learning than, say, Rosetta Stone. And Live Mocha definitely relies more on that peer-to-peer conversational language learning rather than Rosetta Stone's more systematic the curriculum that takes you through learning a language. I think that I think that language learning, even though which is so funny because these are the programs that that often get cut, and this is actually why this week Live Mocha is stepping up to help offer scholarships to students in colleges so they can continue to offer language learning. Of course, offer language learning through Live Mocha, but I think that peer-to-peer piece is really important, and I think you can spend a lot of time learning a language, but if you aren't actually practicing it conversationally, it doesn't really help much.
So is there a connection here? I've been skeptical of some of what I see as gamification, although I am going to help run this gaming and education conference. But oftentimes I feel like there's sort of this surface level of trying to bring gaming and education that doesn't resonate with me. But it sure seems that gamification and language learning would go together really, really well. Is that being done?
When you say gamification, what are you meaning?
Well, I'm thinking of the degree to which games keep attention, that they challenge you to the right level. They're scaffolded learning. They provide social interaction and then a very structured understanding of how to get you from one place to the next.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that I've noticed a lot. I mean, I think that this is one of the interesting things with mobile devices for practicing games that help you practice too. There was this week, I think Gary Steger responded rather harshly to a post that Vicki Davis had in the New York Times about adaptive learning, and he was critical, I think, of these of software that sort of just rote memorization. But frankly, when it comes to some language learning, like I think that memorization piece is actually sort of important. Whether it's trying to remember, just helping yourself work through the flashcards and with that's not sort of how you're going to acquire a language, but it's a great way to sort of practice and brush up on your vocabulary and remembering which way the accents go, where accents go in your French, in French and stuff. So I have seen a lot of really good mobile games, but then those are missing the social component. So there's just sort of practice games for one person.
I'm convinced that games do such a good job of tapping into the variety of ways in which we're motivated as human beings, from the individual sort of emotional and capability standpoints, from the social in terms of people helping us, but also the sort of social pressure, and then at the sort of highly structured level in which objects or structure kind of inherently drive us in certain directions. And I'm sort of fascinated by how games touch on all of those, and then the degree to which, if you applied those principles to learning, whether or not it's gamification, those are just really good principles of how you help motivate people.
Right. I mean, and I think that that there's something about pleasure and joy and the fun of gaming that I think we shouldn't, even though learning is serious. I think there's this playful seriousness or serious playfulness that is really important to remember when it comes to really sort of taking charge of your own learning experiences too.
Good. So 2 really interesting reports out from Joan Gant's Cooney Center.
Yeah.
One, that kids prefer ebooks.
I think that this one is really interesting because, and I should be clear, these are ebooks for their sort of for their pleasure reading. This isn't textbooks, and I think it's important to remember that everyone seems to love reading on e-readers. Nobody seems to like digital textbooks, and that's something I think to keep in mind when Apple makes its announcement next week. So far, digital textbooks have sort of been less, they haven't really fulfilled the promise, I think. But yeah, kids say in the study they prefer reading ebooks to printed books, and they were also able to they had the same level of reading comprehension with both, which is one of these concerns that somehow if you're reading on a screen, are you having that same experience that you would if you were holding a piece of paper in your hand.
Mhm. I still choose a physical book when I know I'm going to make notes in it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I can't, I've just not been able to find an experience that I like online. But I
Right.
will say that free reading books
Mm-hmm.
and news articles, I not only like them as much reading them online, I actually believe I read faster. And the conclusion I've come to for myself is that I'm not tracking across long lines of text,
Yeah.
and I do the best on a phone.
Yeah, there's. I have to wonder too if there's something about the you quote turn the pages more often on the phone that I don't know if it
Hmm.
makes you feel like though you're if it makes you feel as though you're reading faster, or you feel as though you're accomplishing more, or you really are. But I feel the same way. I feel as though I plow through books in the digital format.
Fascinating. Okay, the a second study was they looked at Apple apps,
Yeah,
and what did they find?
this was a really interesting study. In fact, I was just, I've been sitting here this afternoon sort of thinking through what my wish list would be for Apple to make on their education announcement. And looking through this Cooney Center study about that, because they found a number of interesting things. One is that over 80% of apps, of educational apps, I should say here, target children, and they're particularly target the preschool age. So there's just a wealth of educational content out there for really young kids, and it absolutely drops off as students get older. And by the time they get to high school, there's actually very little high school high school appropriate educational content in the App Store, which is an interesting opportunity, I think, to think about if you're an app developer.
Do you think that this is reflective of a lack of demand, or that there's some other reason that people are focusing on the younger ages?
I think I think that partially, I think that when you're providing an educational tool for a toddler, you know that you're selling it to a parent. And I think that because once kids reach school age, the question of educational content, we think about what happens at school, and for better or for worse, the Apple devices really still are consumer devices, not institutional devices. And I think it seems like a harder sell to get educational content to high schoolers, because I think our minds go automatically to, well, what are they learning in school? And that's as a lot of, I think that's a tougher nut to crack in terms of getting your device or getting your app in adopted by schools as opposed to individuals. I think that's probably
Interesting.
partially the reason.
I wonder if there's a gaming connection here as well.
Well, and I think that that's probably it too. I think that as a parent of a still a teenager, I think that the games, I think that the age group is probably more interested in games. I wonder if they're interested in ebooks, but not in ebook apps. And so perhaps they're still using app content that we could deem educational, but it just doesn't fall in that education category.
Right. Fascinating. Okay, so the New York Times reported on a study by some economists that great teachers matter,
Yes.
looking over 20 years of data. So I found your short reply here very telling, which is you say, but from that, can we really simply conclude that fire the teachers is the solution? That study or your reporting of it
Mm-hmm.
led me to ask, what makes a great teacher? And clearly, it would not be firing the bad teachers, but it would be focusing, for me, it would be focusing on, can we identify the behaviors of great teachers? And are we teaching that?
Well, I think that, and the other piece I would add to that is that a great teacher for me might not be a great teacher for you, and I might really connect with one particular teacher that I think is a great, sort of a great teacher, and that teacher might not be able to, for a number of reasons, might not make the same connection with other kids, and so I think that this is this is we're talking about human relationships here, and I think that in addition to just sort of have teachers, effectively quote, sort of instilled the content into their students so that they can perform well on standardized tests. Um, I think that assessing sort of how human relationships work and how they work well is is really complicated, and I'm not sure that I think that sometimes we're asking the wrong questions, and as such we're getting the wrong answers, and then making questionable policy decisions based on that.
Fascinating. Okay, I didn't understand the story on the Boston College study on video games. It's not too much screen time, but it's too much adult control.
Yes.
What does that mean?
I think it means that this was a study sort of responding to, which is, I mean, I think it's just been an ongoing concern pre-computers, of course, back to television. Sort of, are we letting kids watch too much TV? Are we letting kids play too many video games? Are kids spending too much time in front of the computer? And this study said no. But what we need to make sure is that the time that they're spending is quality time, and that maybe we should be sort of more concerned about the ways in which some parents are sort of dictating what their kids do, and not letting their kids sort of explore and be playful in these scenarios, make their own decisions about what their interests are, and rather just sort of just being really restrictive with the screen time, which makes the screen time sort of, it sort of twists it into sort of, is it just a reward? Is it not fun? That sort of thing. So it was a questioning sort of what are the motivations behind just controlling the ways in which we allow kids to interact with computers.
Fascinating. Okay. I really like Hewlett, but
Yeah.
Is there a worse phrase in the English language right now than robot graders?
Yeah, this story both fascinates me and horrifies me, right? So the Hewlett Foundation is sponsoring a data science competition to find a way, if there is a way for us to automate the grading of student essays. And the justification is, right, that clearly essays are a better way to gauge students' understanding of material than a multiple choice test, which I firmly believe that is true. Multiple choice tests I don't think they're a great assessment tool. That being said, I have to wonder how, whether or not standardizing an essay so that it can be read by a robot is really the most creative way to get creative responses from students either.
I hate to end on that note.
I know. Isn't there some other piece of news that we can wrap up with?
I think that the theme there really is the human relations piece, and so maybe I'll end myself with the reminder of just the value of the human connection and how important that is. And I can't remember if I brought it up in this show or in some other event I was doing, but I do see that in science fiction we have these sort of two visions of education in the future. One of which is standing in front of a screen and the screen dump. Yeah, we did talk about it, and the other is this very Socratic, personal experience. And I think that we do have we envision two different futures for how we learn. Mm-hmm. And I definitely side with the more human contact one.
Yeah, and I fear any time that we have robot graders, then we'll have robot teachers, and soon we'll have robot education journalists, and then and then what?
And where will the irony be? Audrey, you're terrific. Thank you for another great week of deep education thought. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Take care.
Bye.